Rick Joyner was personally named in a recent lawsuit related to a clergy sexual abuse case involving minors. The complaint suggested Joyner bears some responsibility for what happened on his watch and included the following allegations. Rick Joyner, David Yarnes, and Doug Lee made up part of the leadership at Morningstar. Joyner was the senior pastor and CEO, and Yarnes was second in charge. Douglas Lee was head of security and involved in the day-to-day running of the Young Special Forces program by his son Erickson Lee. Joyner, Yarnes, and Lee were charged with protecting the minors of Morningstar from exploitation and abuse by employees or youth leaders. Sometime in the 2000s, 2 women at Morningstar University were sexually assaulted by an employee of Morningstar. This put leadership on notice of the potential danger to vulnerable persons, including students or minors, by predators. The provision of safety and enacting safety measures provides for the prevention of predatory conduct or actions by employees or members. In order to prevent harm to vulnerable persons, including children, Morningstar had to be proactive. There was a second sexual assault at Morningstar sometime after the assembly was created. A child was going on a field trip, but the mother of the minor was leery of a particular Morningstar University volunteer, and specifically asked that her child not be exposed to that person. But Morningstar did not protect the minor. He was abused and assaulted by the specific person warned about by the mother. Both these incidents of sexual abuse and assault were covered up. In both instances, the victims were encouraged not to report the crimes to law enforcement. Joyner, Yarnes, and Doug Lee knew of these assaults, yet helped orchestrate the victims to not report the crimes to law enforcement. The admonition not to contact the authorities when someone has been sexually assaulted is reckless, and it could be a criminal offense punishable by incarceration. These 2 separate incidents are whispered about by members of the church. There is no telling how many others have occurred and were concealed by Morningstar and its leadership. The 2 incidents were actual notice of the need to ensure proper training, monitoring, and supervision of youth leaders or others. They were also notice that Morningstar needed to have proper policies, procedures, and other written admonitions to protect vulnerable members of the church, including minor children. Police have discovered several minor children were abused by someone connected to Morningstar. 250 people have demanded the resignation of Rick Joyner. The leader of the advocate group supporting survivors of abuse posted the following message online on November 3. I'm reaching out with some updates on where things stand with our calls for accountability at Morningstar. Continued silence and censorship highlights Morningstar's culture of fear and control. It's been 1 month since I publicly addressed Morningstar's leadership team and board. Since then, not a single board member has responded to me, despite my direct outreach to several of them. Only one current Morningstar leader responded to me by email, but the individual did not answer any of the questions I asked, and instead affirmed Rick Joyner as a great leader. Morningstar and Joyner have blocked me on Facebook, despite the fact that all I did was use comments to post the link to our statement or to news about the most recent and horrific cases of abuse of minors by a leader at Morningstar. I'm flagging this for 2 important reasons. First, this response is incredibly hypocritical coming from a church that claims to be about truth, freedom, and free speech. Second, even more important, it is clear evidence of the culture of fear, silencing, punishment, and control that Joyner has created and overseen. This has played a key part in allowing many forms of abuse to happen without accountability for decades. These responses are also clear signs of corrupt or bad leadership. Good leaders are open and responsive to feedback and criticism. What does it tell you that in 4 days, over 100 people who were part of Morningstar in some way signed our petition calling for accountability? We now have the signatures of 250 people, the vast majority of whom had personal experience at Morningstar. A leader truly committed to love and truth would seek to understand these people's stories and why they felt compelled to sign. Instead, Joyner dismissed us as disgruntled. He and other leaders should be seeking to understand why so many people signed a statement that calls for accountability and Joyner's resignation, not condemning them for doing so and forbidding their staff from signing. More victims are starting to come forward. Many of them are genuinely scared to speak out publicly, which we completely understand, especially given Rick Joyner's response to those who have. But more survivors are beginning to speak out publicly. We stand with each and every victim of abuse at Morningstar. If you are one of them, please know that there are many of us who are supporting you whether you speak out or not. If you would like to be connected with resources, share your story anonymously, or be connected with the attorney who is supporting other victims, please email us. I personally urge those still living at Morningstar properties, attending the church, working there, or giving money, that you demand transparency and answers to your questions from current leadership. I also recommend demanding financial transparency, which of course is the hallmark of solid and trustworthy Christian organizations, but something Rick Joyner has refused forever. There are major financial issues at stake, and I have personally found red flags in public records related to Morningstar's financial practices. Those of you living there deserve to know what's transpiring and what might happen so you can plan accordingly, and not be stuck in a dire situation that you didn't expect, because Joyner and other leaders refuse to be transparent. More news and evidence will be coming out soon. New evidence that has recently been released is the testimony of a former student. Leah said she attended classes at Morningstar in 2008. When she was 19, she was harassed with highly inappropriate text messages sent by one of Rick Joyner's married leaders in his mid to late 30s. She ended up reporting her experience to a third-year female leader at Morningstar she trusted, and this led to a bulk email asking 90 women on campus to attend a special meeting if they had been abused by this leader. I walked in, she said, and there were so many girls there, I was just completely shocked. I was so saddened. I said to myself, I can't believe this has happened to this many girls. There were over 30 girls there. Rick Joyner showed up and informed them the abusive leader had been released. The third-year leader told Leah she had brought the text messages straight to Joyner. But then Leah suffered spiritual abuse because she was blamed for the unsolicited advances. After Joyner informed his other leaders about the text messages, Leah was shamed and shunned, first by those leaders, then other students, and even her friends. The problem that I had, she said, was they weren't willing to sit down with the victims and understand what had happened. Instead, they were essentially accusing the entire group of women of having the same evil spirit. Leah went on to share another disturbing story about a different Morningstar leader. When she was 19, she was dating a youth pastor. He told her that he was struggling with an image addiction and confessed his attraction to minors. She said she tried to break up with him, but he wouldn't let her. He was the one to decide their relationship status. She had to remain in the relationship if he wanted her. I said to him, "We've broken up." He said, "No, we're not broken up." I tried to break up with him again, but a Morningstar leader pulled me into his office, him and another leader, who were well known in the church. He said, "Well, we've been told that you're trying to break up with him again. What's going on? We really think we're hearing from God that this is supposed to happen. It's from God that you guys are supposed to be together. He's planning on asking you to marry him." I said, "Do you actually understand to what extent he's dealing with these problems on the computer looking at these videos?" And they said, "Yeah, we know." I said, "So why do you think that I would want to marry him? Why do you think that would be okay?" And they said, "Well, we really think that marriage is going to help this. We think that if you guys get married, the wedding needs to be this year." I said, "I just don't feel like that's the right thing to do." The leader bends down and he says, "Let me put it this way. If you don't marry him, we're going to fire him, and if we fire him, it's going to be your fault." "Okay, interesting," I said. "Interesting." I remember he was so happy to be the youth pastor, so I didn't want to hurt him. I just didn't want to be with him. So I said, "How can you think that this is okay for a youth pastor to be struggling to this extent to the point that it's actually changing his day-to-day routines? And then not just that, but he's admitting to me that he's actually lusting after children and youth. And will tell me that he positions himself during worship so that he can stare at two specific girls who are 13 and 15 years old." I said, "That is wrong. Do you know that this is going on?" And he said, "Yes, we know what's going on and we're trying to deal with it. We think that you guys need to get married." I said, well, that's not going to happen, and I just walked away. We broke up, but they didn't fire him and he stayed on. Ministry Watch said it had obtained the results of a survey within a social media group of homeschool families associated with Morningstar. 33% of the families had decided to leave because of the recent allegations, but another 37% had not yet decided what they would do. When asked about their comfort level with leaving their children to participate in Morningstar programs, a majority said they would either not take their kids to the programs, or were not comfortable with their children being left behind.